Do you feel like you've done everything right when it comes to learning English? You took classes, you read in your free time, you watch films, and you make an effort to improve, to become fluent, but it just doesn't happen? I have heard this complaint so often from my students, and today we're going to talk about what you can do after the intermediate level so that you can boost your fluency. There are so many resources out there to learn and improve your English every day. You have YouTube, you have social media, teachers out there teaching great lessons, vocabulary lessons, grammar lessons. You would think that people would just naturally become better at English as they have so much contact to the language and to fluent English speakers. But this just isn't the case. And today I want to talk about why beginner and intermediate level English is completely different from learning advanced English and propelling your fluency. So if you're like most people, you learned English maybe in school or later in life, and your English courses at the beginning, they followed a pretty predictable structure, right? So you learned grammar, reading and writing skills, you had listening practice. From a teacher's point of view, teaching beginners is so rewarding because the curve of learning is really fast. This has a lot to do with the structure of English. Basic English grammar is quite easy to learn. It's easy to start speaking in English. This is because English does not have a lot of conjugation, for one thing. So our nouns stay the same, our adjectives don't change, and the articles are easy. At the beginning, you can get along with basic vocabulary, put it together in a certain order. Also, English sentences are quite short. It's quite easy to start speaking with minimal vocabulary and communicate, for example, with other non-native speakers at the beginning. Sure, we have auxiliary verbs, we have two present tenses, but think about it. The future tense is quite simple. You can get along just using will future, even though in a lot of cases you're maybe using the wrong future, but everyone will understand you. Regular past tense, you just add an ed at the end of most verbs. If the verb is irregular, okay, they're hard to memorize, but everyone will understand you if you say, for example, I eated instead of I ate. So what you do is you go through the beginner to intermediate level, and once you reach this level and you've really practiced all the tenses and everything, and you can call yourself an intermediate speaker of English, something changes. I hear from almost everybody that they plateau, that their English stagnates just when they feel like they're really having fun learning English and they want to start speaking to native speakers, understanding films, watch TV shows. And it's right at this moment where they realize there's so much they don't understand. They know the words, but they have a kind of block when they have to speak. Some people may think, okay, I've been studying for 2 years or so, and I'm just not motivated to put the effort in anymore. No matter how much they try to study, using the same patterns that they used before, they just can't reach fluency. What does it mean to be fluent? Chances are you're probably fluent in one or two areas of English. For example, speaking about a specific topic. I've met a lot of people who are fluent at work, but then they go out, and when it comes time to talk about different topics, everyday topics, they just don't have the vocabulary, they don't know those small talk phrases, they don't have enough idiomatic language to communicate. So that's one thing you have to consider. Where do you want to be fluent? At the beginning, you're not going to be fluent in every situation. I like to think of English as an upside-down triangle. Here's the diagram. So at the beginning, it's quite basic. You learn basic grammar and structure and vocabulary, and it all goes pretty easy. And then after about 2 years of learning, I would say, at this point, you're aware that there are idioms and expressions in English. Here is where you really have to start using them and expose yourself to much, much more vocabulary. Remember that English is a very rich language. It's rich in vocabulary. We have new words being added to English every day. There's jargon. So you have a specific English and words that are used in the news, in science, in computer technology. In every field you have jargon that is not everyday English, and of course you're not going to know these terms because you don't hear them every day. This, by the way, is German. German is a real triangle. The grammar is difficult from the very beginning, and a lot of people give up when they start learning the difference between dative and accusative. So you don't have just one article for nouns, you have feminine, masculine, neuter, and then those articles change depending on the case, depending on the part of the sentence. So this is something that's very, very difficult at the beginning of German, but once you overcome that threshold, in my experience, everything is easy. Also because the basic vocabulary that you know, those words can be put together to form the longer words. That's not always the case in English. Our words are complicated. There are words rooted in Latin, in Greek, in Old English, and in French. The vocabulary is something you really need to focus on if you want to become an advanced speaker. Personally, I think the speed of fluency depends on three things. One of them is age. It's true. If you start learning English before the age of 12, you have a really big advantage to pick up correct pronunciation and absorb the language like a sponge, use it in a playful way. However, I've also had excellent students who were over the age of 50. This is no excuse for not becoming fluent in English. Another factor is your goals. So if you have a new job where you have to speak English every day, you're going to make sure that you make an effort to speak the language, you're exposed to it every day, and this will propel your fluency. The third and most important factor for learning English that I want to talk about today is how you study English. So we were talking before about how you learn English at school or when you start out learning English as a second language or a foreign language. And you focus on the skills of reading, writing, speaking, and listening. What do those skills have in common? When you read, what are you doing? You're taking in the language. And when you're listening, you're also taking in the language. You're passively taking in the language. So if you listen to podcasts, if you read in your free time, these won't hurt your fluency. It's great for your English. You need exposure to the language, but you're not producing anything. Your brain isn't working in a way that it needs to work when you are fluent in English, when you're speaking to people, when you're writing an email, when you're producing sounds, when you're producing language. So I really strongly believe that once you find the basis for English, when you feel that you can keep up with people's conversations, listening to them, when you can watch a TV show with subtitles and follow quite comfortably, at this point, you need to change your study habits and you need to find a way to speak and to write all of the time. You need to spend at least 70% of your study time either writing or speaking. And I know that's a hard task, and a lot of people have excuses why they can't do this. Maybe you don't know anyone who speaks English, you don't have a partner to talk to, nobody gives you writing homework. I know it's not easy, but if you want to become fluent, if you want to become advanced, you have to speak and you have to write. The students I see excel in English, they all write. They all do their homework. Some of my students are very talkative and they also progress a lot because I'm able to correct them in class and they have experience using the language, using the new vocabulary that they pick up. But those who speak in class and write for homework and get their homework corrected and see their mistakes, those are the students that really progress. So I imagine you're here on YouTube. You sometimes come to YouTube to practice your English and you watch a nice teacher. Maybe she explains some grammar or phrases. Learning random vocabulary passively won't help you too much unless you write it down and you talk about it or you write about it. So if you, for example, you listen to a podcast, if you just listen to it, you'll forget about it. But if you take notes, or even if you don't take notes, but then you go and write a summary of what you heard, this will help your English fluency because your brain is thinking about the vocabulary, so your memory is activated, and your brain also has to put those words together in English sentences. So this helps you think about the structure of English and think about how to organize your thoughts in an English way, in a fluent way. Even if nobody reads it, it's still a good way to practice English because you're producing something. After you have your summary, you can also talk about it. Reading out loud is also quite passive. It doesn't help you too much because you're thinking more, you're concentrating more on the reading than the speaking. But if you were to talk to somebody about what you listen to, that would also be a useful way to become more fluent in English. There should always be some activity involved. I would recommend having a small journal, keeping a small journal and writing down, either write down what you did that day, like a normal diary, in English, or for example, if there's a podcast you like or you watch a film in English, you can have a journal just for summarizing films or ideas. Or if you read a book in English, literacy is very important, not just in a foreign language, but in your own language. I think everybody should read. But the habit should be to also write about what you read or to speak about what you read, so that you're producing something. I think we often lose track of time when we're on YouTube because we're just switching from video to video and it feels like we're doing something that's good for ourselves, but we also lose track of time. And one tip I could give you is write down the amount of time you spend on passive learning as opposed to how much time you spend actively learning. And I want you to try to increase the amount of time you spend speaking and writing while decreasing the amount of time you spend listening and reading. I'm sure you'll find yourself becoming much more fluent in English if you do so. I would also like to mention what you can do to improve your advanced vocabulary. So I mentioned one of the challenges in learning advanced English is the amount of phrases, expressions, and idioms. If you really want to advance your vocabulary in English, I want you to take special note of phrasal verbs. So these are words where you have a verb and a preposition, sometimes two prepositions put together to form a phrase that has a specific meaning. For example, turn down means to reject. Has nothing to do with turn or the preposition down. You just have to remember that that phrasal verb means reject or decline, like to turn down an offer. These are so prevalent in English, it's really urgent that you learn them if you want to be fluent. So while you're reading, I want you to underline these words and also keep them in a journal or keep them in a database where you can review them from time to time. But remember, don't just keep them nicely tucked in your journal. I want you to use them. You could do this by writing down example sentences or speaking about them. You can also make an audio journal where you speak into your microphone. If you make coherent sentences using new phrases and new phrasal verbs, then you'll be more likely to pull them up during conversation when you're speaking to English speakers. Idiomatic language is also important. So if you come across a saying or an expression that's new to you, then also make note of it. Google the phrase with meaning after it. It'll give you the meaning, or you Google the phrase with examples after it, and it'll give you a list of example sentences. So you can see how the words are used in context. Many words are synonyms. Maybe there are 2 or 3 words with the same meaning, but learning them randomly won't help you when it comes time to speak or write. You need to know the context these words are used in and how to use them in a sentence. I want you to think about all of the study skills you're working on now and how you're accumulating your English knowledge. Think about whether it's active or passive. If you're just listening, then it's passive. If it requires you to produce English, either in speaking or writing, then it's active and you're doing a great job. This awareness will help show you why you may not be progressing as fast as you would like to. If you would like a partner to speak with, you can look on Facebook. There are a lot of groups, or maybe you can ask in the comments if anyone wants to be your speaking partner. I know a lot of people say, oh, I only want to speak with a native speaker, or I'm going to learn mistakes if I speak to a non-native speaker. That's not true. Any practice is better than no practice. And I also think you should have reasonable goals. So if your goal is to speak like a native speaker, first of all, what is a native speaker? That's a topic for another video. If you're an upper intermediate English speaker, you're not going to speak like someone from London just by having a few conversations with them. It takes a long, long time to lose your accent. Your goal should be to have a neutral accent, to speak clearly, and to be understood by everybody. If your speaking partner has a strong accent that's hard for you to follow, then yeah, that's an issue. But if you're speaking to someone who has, say, a Japanese accent, you're not going to pick up their accent after speaking to them 5 or 10 times. Don't let that be an excuse. Find someone who's about the same level as you, and the point should be just to practice and to produce the language that you already have passively in your brain. The last thing I want you to do is to send me a message in the comments. Tell me about the last news article you read, or tell me about the last podcast you listened to. I'll give you feedback on your writing and you'll have a chance to practice. And if you want a free journal with writing prompts, I'll put a link to 2 of them in the show notes, so you can download those and you can start making a habit of keeping a journal in English. Thanks for watching and see you next time. Take care.